Welcome to the Revive Podcast. I'm your host, Freddie Romero, part of the pastoral team here at Revive Church. And this is the podcast for those looking to be part of the movement of people who are living out their redemptive purpose in their circles of influence. And if that's you, you're here to be informed, inspired, and resourced. And today I am so excited that we have Miley Waterman on our show today. And so let me share a little bit about Miley. She is the CEO of Brave Global, a campaign that invites God's people to reach out to the most vulnerable girls with a message of empowerment in every community across the Western world. They primarily focus on solving human trafficking by intentionally serving girls in the foster care system. Miley lives in Arizona with her husband, Brian, and their son, Rex, who is a baller on the football field. If you want to know more about Brave Global, and we're going to talk a lot about Brave and what they do and what Miley does as she leads this movement, and they are influencing not only other churches, but they're also collaborating with government agencies across city, state, and even national lines. It's an amazing story. Go to braveglobal.org to learn more about what they do and how they do it and how you can be involved, but also to check out their brand new book that they just published, Brave in Real Life. These are powerful stories of women who've overcome sexual exploitation. Now, this book is a book that is in our bookshelf at home. We were one of the first ones to buy it, and you should too. You should purchase this. You'll find it at braveglobal.org. It is a book that you're not going to want to put down, and it's definitely going to inspire you and open your eyes to a lot of things. And so it's going to give you hope, though. And that's the beauty of this book. I read it, and through its pages, all I kept thinking was, it gave me hope because there is an organization and a group of people, a group of women that are intentionally fighting and advocating for people who are being sexually exploited. So, Miley, you are no stranger to Revive. You are an OG, a pioneer here, a friend and family. Thank you so much for being on the Revive podcast.
Hi, Freddie. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. And I'm so happy that you are here. And people feel like, they might laugh when I call you an OG because like we're I grew up in South LA and also moved to Wilmington. And so when we call someone an OG, it's in terms of endearment, because they pretty much run the block. They live there. They were born there. And so for a lot of people, they may think that, I'm just saying that. But the reality is that you are an original here at Revive. Because before Revive was Revive, it was 7th Street Church, which a lot of people know. But before that, it was Parkcrest, which you were a part of. So we want to know a little bit about you. So tell us, like, especially in this context, how like you were there from its origins, from this ministry's origins. You've been here.
Yeah. So before Revive was 7th Street, and before that, like you said, was Parkcrest Christian Church. And that's the church that I grew up in my high school years. I was born and raised here in Southern California. My husband and I got married at Parkcrest, and about, I want to say 15 years ago, I hope I have that right, Parkcrest decided to church plant in the building that you and I sit in now.
Yeah.
They wanted to be closer to downtown Long Beach in a more urban setting. And so that was the 7th Street Church Parkcrest campus.
Yeah.
And then maybe a year later, they found Joshua and Noemi Chavez, and they brought them on board as the lead campus pastors. And maybe a little bit after that, they released us. And so Joshua and Noemi were on their own with this campus, and it was just 7th Street Church. And then a little while later, we became Revive Church, a multi-site campus, and now there are multiple campuses, as you know.
Yeah.
And you came on board along with a lot of other cool pastors. I was on staff for a little while.
Yeah.
And Brave was birthed here. This is the birthplace of not only Brave Global, but a few other nonprofits, Gems Uncovered and some others, right here where we sit.
Yeah. Yeah. When we first came to Revive, you guys were so welcoming. And one of the things that I noticed immediately here was how exterior focus Revive or 7th Street at the time was. And, my background and when we come, we were very tribal in terms of like, we really didn't think of any other issues outside of the four walls of our church. So every campaign, every initiative, every activity that we would do was inward focused. We only focused on the congregation. And it's not a bad thing unless it's your primary and only focus. And when I came here, I saw how the church would just rally behind what Brave was doing, and it almost seemed like, um, it was hand in hand, and Jen's been uncovered and stuff. And so you alluded to the fact that, like, Revive has is the birthplace of these movements and these organizations. What do you think leads to that? What about this place leads to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, the heart of the people here at Revive, I believe, is very much to reach the community and to be the church outside the four walls. But I think it's a trickle down effect. Like
Mm,
everything starts at the top first. I mean, I think in any industry, not just in a faith based world, but the lead pastors here, Joshua Noemi Chavez, they don't say no very often. Like if you
yeah.
come to them with an idea, they're pretty much like, yeah, sure. How do you want to make it happen?
Yeah.
So when a member of our congregation at that time, she was the violence prevention coordinator, Tracy Kolunga. She's now the director of innovation all these years later for our
Mm,
city. But she came to us with some statistics around human trafficking in this area and said, the local church really needs to be a first responder alongside these government agencies, non-government agencies, everybody else in the city. Like we need to link arms with them. And Joshua and Noemi said, okay, yeah, what do you want to do? And that's how Brave started.
yeah. And how early on did you come on and start serving with Brave, and why?
Yeah, it was when Tracy brought us that idea, I believe it was 2014, so 7 or 8 years ago. And at that time, I was on staff here at Revive as the director of special events and services. So
Hmm.
I was, in tune with what we were doing on an event scale to reach the community. So that was just at that time. She said, "How do we reach these kids who are in foster care and their caregivers? How do we start resourcing them and coming alongside law enforcement, probation, foster care? What do we do?" And we thought, well, let's do an empowerment event. And so in 2014 was our very first Brave Youth Empowerment event here in this building. And the
Wow.
first time we did it, we had over 150 girls. And then on through the years, I mean, I can say that the last time we had an in person event pre COVID, we were up to 600 foster youth and their
Wow.
caregivers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy. And like we talk about how this is something that the local church started, but now it's not a local church thing. It's like a church thing. And I know that very early on, other churches started to notice and invited you guys to be part of the conversation, right?
Yep.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we started doing with our community, and like I said, linking arms with the other people who are considered first responders in our community, by doing these youth empowerment events, we started to become talked about by other churches. And they were saying, hey, what are you guys doing? We want to do that. Because as many people listening know, the foster care is everywhere.
Yeah.
Trafficking is everywhere. It's a
Yeah.
common misconception that there aren't vulnerable youth in every single neighborhood. There are. It's in your
Mm,
backyard. So they figured out, oh, this church is doing that. Maybe they have a model. Maybe they can coach us. And so this is incredible. But one of the first churches that asked us to coach them was Mariners Church, which is a mega church out
wow.
here in Southern California. And they said, we want to do what you're doing. How do we do this with the school districts and the girls in our area? So we began coaching churches with our model, and now we have brave communities and chapters all over the place. Sometimes it is a local church. Very often we implore the local church to be a first responder because a lot of churches that don't naturally go that way. But even more so now, we have public schools, juvenile halls, other institutions doing brave as well.
Yeah. For the person that has no context, no background,
Mhm.
what does Brave do? Like, what did it do at the beginning, and what has it morphed into, if there has been anything that it's evolved into?
Yeah, well, we exist to empower the most vulnerable youth in order to stop exploitation and trafficking. So when we say the most vulnerable, it is girls in the foster care system, on probation, part of the juvenile justice system, from broken homes. I mean, the term vulnerable or at risk is inclusive of many different types of kids, but we want to get to them before somebody dangerous gets to them. So we want to provide them with resources and a message of identity and hope and empowerment and purpose and inclusion before a pimp or a perpetrator can get to them
Yeah.
with the opposite message and take them down the wrong path. So Brave is very much, I like to say, a preventative
Hmm.
effort. There are a
Hmm.
lot of great organizations doing work to aid victims who have already gone through some sort of exploitation or
Yeah.
trafficking.
Yeah.
Brave is really trying to get to them when they're 9, 10, 11, 12 before they go down that path.
Yeah. You know, I think that as you're saying all these things, you're not, I think for the person who's not living under a rock, you're not saying anything that we don't know.
Right.
I think what you're doing is you're reminding us of a very big need. What personally, Miley, what ignited your heart to jump on board and to say, "Hey, this is what I want to be a part of." Because now you're the CEO, but you had to start somewhere. You had to raise your hand and say, or maybe you were asked to be a part of this. And now, like when I think of Miley, I think of brave, and I think of someone who is is leading a movement and influencing other people to think and be aware of this big, huge need in our world today. But it has a genesis, like all things do. Where was that genesis for you? What was chapter one for you when it comes to Brave?
I think for me personally, like I said, I was on staff here at the time that it was birthed, so it was part of my job to put on this event. I mean, my heart was ignited because my heart is to serve the community through the local church, and it was at that time, and it still is. But it was also my job when I was asked when we decided to incorporate as a 501(c)(3) and become a legit nonprofit on our own, autonomous. I was asked to fulfill the CEO position, and I
Mhm.
actually said no. I said, God, this is a little too big for me. I didn't sign up for this. I never thought I was going to run a nonprofit. And he told me three times in three different ways, yeah, you are. You're the girl for the job. And it was kind of like one of those moments. I know some of you have heard, like, if not me, then who?
Yeah.
I felt like he was saying to me, if not you, then who? And so many of my skills I'm an event producer by trade.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of big brands, a lot of big events. So many of those skills translated into running a nonprofit. I had no idea that they would. But my heart for these girls, once you understand the atrocities that some of them have lived through and what's going on still in 2021, like I said, right here in our own backyard,
Mhm.
you can't look away. I mean, once you see it or you know about it, you can't unsee it. You can't not know about it. And it just, I mean, that feeling, that desire to reach them never left.
Um, you talk about some of the insecurities that I mean, what was that dialogue with you? And you said God spoke to you clearly three times. Is there something you could share about maybe one of those occasions? Because I think that a lot of people do wrestle when they feel a certain calling. And for some people, it may not be an audible voice. I'm not saying yours was, or it may not be an opportunity like this, but it could be something in their lives. And I think that you know, when people see you and they hear you talk, and for example, you're on this podcast, and the whole team was so excited to have you be in town, and we're like, we got to get Miley on the show. It's because you seem like a very confident person that like knew exactly that this is what they wanted to do. So like, if you could just talk about that tension that you had between your no and your yes, I think it just bring a lot of insight to us.
I think what I learned back then was that you have to believe in people who believe in you. Like you have to believe them when they say they believe in you because if you're left up to your own feelings about yourself, your feelings of self-worth, inadequacy, I'm not good enough for the job, I don't have the skills. I mean, I have been doing this work on some level for a few years. I had a 20 years of other types of
Hmm.
experience that would naturally translate into me running an organization, but I was still filled with doubt. And it took three different people to say, "No, we believe you are the girl for the job." I mean, one of them was a man who runs one of the largest ministries here in the United States and resources parents and kids on a very, very wide scale. And I had just
Mm.
met him, and he looked across the table from me and said, "They're right. You are the girl for the job." And so I think you need to
Wow.
believe people who are believing in you.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, a lot of us also have like a false sense of like it's false humility, right?
Hmm.
Like we don't want to step into something,
Hmm.
especially like they're giving you the leadership role,
Right.
and it just looks daunting. I feel like for a lot of people, um, whatever insecurities don't have, and I think you're giving people freedom right now to just believe. I think that when someone sees something in you, you don't see your blind spots, right? So you don't see your weaknesses, but sometimes you don't see your strengths either.
Right. Exactly.
What are some of those strengths that they called out in you that now you look back and you're like, okay, cool. I see that now in myself.
Well, I had been running the Brave Youth Empowerment Conference here as a grassroots effort for like 3 years by the time we incorporated, and all of these people tagged me to be the CEO. And I mean, they were like, "You've been doing it. You're running
Yeah,
these
yeah.
these huge conferences, day-long conferences. You're hiring speakers. You're running volunteer teams of 100, 200 volunteers. You're managing large teams. You're producing the whole event. Like, there's no reason that you shouldn't be the person for the job. You've been doing it on some scale. It's going to get bigger, but we have the model. You've been building the template for 3 years now here in Long
Yeah,
Beach.
yeah.
You have the skills. You've built what you need. You could package it up and start coaching other people. I mean, it's such a kingdom mindset when you
Mm,
when you think about, okay, wow, this assignment, if I can package it up and not be afraid and believe in myself the way that these people believe in me and start coaching other leaders like me all over the country, think of how many girls we can reach. That was the turning point for me. It was like, if I say no, think of all the girls that won't be reached. If not me, then who?
right, right. You know, one of these books that I'm reading, it says success leaves clues. And I think it's also important for if you're leading people that you, whenever there's a movement or an opportunity to do something, engage, like look in your circle, because this is a prime example of when like, and especially for women, right? You get past like there's it's a known fact that women and minorities get passed over for leadership and CEO roles.
Mm-hmm.
This is clearly like they could have gone what is it, an outsourced, right? And
Mm-hmm.
got someone else outside that has a track record in this role or experience as a CEO leading other organizations and movements. But the fact that the focus was inward, who's in our circle that can step
Right.
up and now do this? And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's a reminder for those of us that are leading organizations or churches or campuses, even life groups,
Mm-hmm.
here at Revive, to think of like, okay, who's the next?
Mm-hmm.
And what have they been doing that would lend itself? And because for a lot of people won't take the initiative,
Right.
but they will accept an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're so happy that you took the invitation, from God to do this. And so, what do you think? Like, I feel like now that you've been in this role for a few years, um, and you've been partnering with, and you're talking to city officials, you're talking to people who run agencies, you're talking to people who run churches and other organizations, you must have a pulse. At least that's just how I see and perceive it. You must have a pulse on the church's impact in like civic or social issues. How do you see the church's impact right now, currently?
I think it's like a lot of areas lately that a negative light has been shown on. Like when I say lately, like in the last couple of years, we've been
Mm,
dealing with a lot of civil and social unrest. We've been dealing with a little thing called the pandemic. You know what
mm,
I mean? Like
mm,
there's a lot of division surrounding those things, and
mhm.
the church has been, like many institutions or spaces, has been divided,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like there are a segment of churches who is just like still sitting inside of its four walls and meeting with the same people and not mission based, not
Hmm.
community minded, not outreach, focused. And there are others that are the total opposite. And then there are some that are in between. So I think that right now it is divided. I think that there are churches that are trying to just figure out, like, how do we outreach? How do we become more mission based and focused? And there are churches who just don't want to see that there's a problem. They don't
Yeah.
want to look
Yeah.
because, like I said, you can't unsee it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, that is so good. For those churches that want to, but they're fearful of like, but they really want to, they just don't know how to do it. What would you recommend? How would you point them in the right direction?
I mean, it doesn't have to be this big thing. Like when I say now we're producing events that reach 600 girls in one shot, like that's like somebody's going to go, yeah, well, I can't do that.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's super intimidating. Well, that didn't just happen obviously overnight. Like what we did here at Revive is we just contacted the Long Beach probation unit, the officers, like 40 to 90 officers have to meet every quarter for their quarterly meeting. Like they have to have it. And so, but they always have to have a space, and sometimes they don't have a space. So Pastor Noemi and I reached out to them and said, "Hey, we have a cafe. I mean, it's during a weekday. If we provide the coffee and the donuts, have your unit meeting
Yeah.
at our cafe, and we'll provide the food. And if you could just give us like 5 minutes on the agenda to talk about Brave and how you can invite the girls on your caseloads, then you can stay for 2 hours and have your whole meeting. Use our media, use our AV, whatever. So like, and then take a box of donuts to the foster care, social workers, and tell them with a little note that says, "We see you. We know you're weary.
Yeah.
This church right down here, we're not weird. We're just praying for you." Like just the smallest things. Back in 2014, we started doing those things. Let me tell you, all these years later, when probation wants to invite a faith-based organization to their meetings to give them input and to speak life into those people, they call Revive Church first.
Wow.
They do.
Wow.
I've been witness to it. They call
Yeah.
us to speak to them. They call us for space. When LBPD or foster care system wants people to be on their faith-based cohorts or in their meetings to speak into the community, outreach that they're doing, they call Revive Church first. So we have become a first responder, but it started with just offering little things like that. It was so easy.
Yeah.
And then you foster those relationships, and now 7 years later, here we are.
Yeah. You sowed seeds then
Mm-hmm.
that you're seeing the fruit of it now. And it does seem very, we want to change the world.
Yeah. It's so intimidating.
Every, and we all want to. We all every one of us who leads a church or is part of leading a church, we want to have significant impact. But who knew that significant impact could start with donuts and coffee?
Right. Exactly.
You
And
know-
that's the thing. You don't know, but just do it.
Just try it.
Do it anyway.
Just try it. That is so liberating on so many levels. And if you're listening to this, start where you are.
Yep.
Start with what you have,
Yep.
and use what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a ton of lessons to be taken on that, because I have seen that even for El Monte,
Mm-hmm.
our campus there. You have relationships that have developed over the years that now they come knocking on our campus over there in the San Gabriel Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and to partner and collaborate with us
Mm-hmm.
because of the seeds that you sowed way back when with donuts and coffee and space and hosting them well and serving them well. And for a lot of organizations and agencies, some of the reasons they don't partner with churches is because they think that the church wants something that will just be self-benefiting.
Yep.
In this
Yeah.
situation, you said we do want something, but it's the same thing you want.
Mm-hmm.
We want to solve this issue.
Yeah.
What have been some of the conversations that you've had with, say, like government employees or officers that have these caseloads? What are some of the personal conversations that you've had with them? And maybe some of the surprising, maybe something that gave them great insight about what this church does.
Yeah, well, at the onset of Brave, when we were trying to find the girls who would be invited to these events, the most vulnerable girls, we were reaching out to plenty of probation officers, like I said, and social workers. And when we reached out to them and asked them to be a part of this advisory board for our first event, some of them were like, they're not maybe people of faith, they're unchurched, as some people might say.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
they came and they were like, "What is it that you want to do? And are you going to be like praying or laying on of hands?" We were like, "How do you even know what that means?" Like we were like, "No, this isn't weird. Like we really just want to have them at our campus. Just think of it as a campus. If you don't want to call it a church, we want them to be here so we can love on them, motivate them, empower them." Our speakers, if their story of faith and their journey with God intersects all of what they have to say, we tell them to mention it, but we're not preaching at these girls. Once they started understanding that, these leaders in the community and from the government, they were like, "Oh, okay." And then it took us, just that 1 year to kind of prove ourselves, and they were totally bought into the idea of Brave and this particular local church helping to reach the community. And like I mentioned, all these years later, now the directors of adult probation are asking us to be on their committee and speak into they're piloting this year gender specific treatment and efforts here in Long Beach City. And they've asked Revive to be on those committees that are speaking into that, because they're finding out that the female probation clients need much different things than the male probation clients. So we're helping them develop programs right now that are reaching those people. And so that's a huge testament. I mean, without going into all the individual
No, no, for
conversations, it's a
sure.
huge testament to their belief in a local church.
Absolutely. I mean, so much in fact that my wife was also telling me like they've seen the impact that Brave Conference has had on these girls that they started to also incentivize,
Yeah.
some of the girls,
Yeah.
right, to show up.
Exactly. Yeah. So we will, before every Brave conference, we go to all the meetings and wherever all the people are that care for these girls. And we tell them, we ask for 5 minutes on their agenda. Let us tell you about this conference coming up. Please invite your girls. And yeah, a couple of times they have actually told their probation officers and social workers, here are gift cards, offer them to the girls so they will come to this event.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, to see like, and you're not going to invest in, especially in government, because like any organization that's trying to do good, we're always underfunded. You're right. It's like,
Hmm.
it's a common issue, something that probably brings us together as well. So when you're going to fund something and invest in something, you know that there's an ROI, there's a return on
Hmm.
investment. And so for them to say, hey, here are these gift cards that people have donated, have given, that we've bought
Hmm.
so that you can incentivize girls to come. Um, it just speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And it's for the church and Brave specifically to be a resource that is also probably a relief,
Yeah.
for a lot of these caseworkers.
Hmm.
I mean, that's such a blessing, Miley. Like, as I'm listening to you, I can't help but to be inspired. I can't imagine anyone listening to this and not feel inspiration, for what you guys have done. What does a girl or someone from foster care system experience at a Brave conference?
So it's just a day of being loved on and poured into and given the attention that they probably don't get any other time in their um, mostly sad, vulnerable life. I mean, by the time a foster kid is a teenager, the likelihood of them finding a forever home and being adopted is really slim to none. I mean, as you and I both know, people that are interested in foster and adoption want to
Yeah.
care for babies. They want
Yeah.
to adopt somebody they can shape and mold and nurture. So I'll never forget the very first event that we had. I'll never forget this because I have just felt so bad about what I said the whole time. This girl was getting back on the bus. She must have been 17. And I said, okay, I hope to see you. I hope to see you next year. And she said, lady, I don't even know where I'm going to be in 30 days. And she got back on the bus and she was smiling. She had a great time. She had her goodie bag. And I do believe what she had experienced that day will forever impact her. But what she said was right. These girls, these older teenage girls, they're getting moved around every 30 days from group home to foster home with a garbage bag, literally a garbage bag full of their personal belongings. That's all they have to their name.
Mm.
So, I think that um, it's just for me, that's like when I think about that girl, that's just the driving force.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the driving force.
You know, um, I'm sure that as successful as Brave has become and is becoming, you guys have probably been met with internal and external challenges. What are some of those that you guys are currently facing, or some of the ones that some big ones that you've faced in the past?
Internally, probably the same as every other young nonprofit.
Mhm.
We started out as volunteer based, 100%. I didn't make a salary for at least 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
so that is always difficult. Um, when you're engaging volunteers, it's not always, the most reliable. Anybody in ministry understands that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pouring into and nurturing that has to go on that level. As we've grown, we've been able to bring more people on staff and contract more people, which has been really amazing because there are people that are truly on our team that are invested in the mission. And, I would say that external challenges, people just not understanding the issue that is
Mhm.
sex trafficking, human trafficking, exploitation on many levels.
Yeah.
It happens in many different forms. I think, like I've mentioned a few times, it's happening everywhere. It doesn't just like happen in developing countries or
Yeah.
third world places, it's everywhere. So I think an external challenge is just to continue to raise awareness and have people understand that this is happening to where they live.
Yeah. I know that I've seen Brave also be very invested in legislation, very mindful and aware. of what is going on and how everything is a collaboration. This particular issue is so much bigger than any one organization, one agency, one church can solve.
Hmm.
Um, it definitely takes a lot of collaboration. Do you guys have someone like on staff, or is that yourself that like reviews legislation that is coming up that will either aid in helping this or be, become become harder for you guys to solve this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's really me and our co-founders, Noemi Chavez and Danielle Strickland.
Hmm.
Um, Me on the level that I'm the one communicating with anybody in government who wants to know what Brave does. Like a couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at the city council in favor of a bill that would allow law enforcement to go into massage parlors anytime that they want and
Hmm.
check them out, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and assess the risk, et cetera. So that was something we were instrumental in. I think that, Danielle, who lives in Canada, she's very active in advocating for the Indigenous community over there, which is a huge vulnerable
Oh,
community.
wow.
And so she's very involved in speaking into that level of legislation. And, right now, I would say that there's a lot being done. Um, to combat human trafficking on a government level and even on a local jurisdiction level. However, my main concern, and I did want to bring this up since I have the platform, is internet safety. I mean, right now, kids are being so groomed online, and traffickers are becoming more and more and more sophisticated with geo targeting kids. Devices that take pictures against their will when they're talking to them, grooming them, and saying that they will post pictures of them online or send them to their parents if they don't do what they want. They use games. How many of our kids are playing
Yeah.
games online
Yeah.
right now? So
Yeah.
like that has become a major, major hub for grooming, and trafficking comes out of
Yeah.
that. So what I would like to see is more attention focused on not only keeping the internet safe, but elevated penalties
Yeah.
for people that commit those crimes.
Yeah. Do you feel that the penalties aren't severe enough to deter?
Depending on the state, it's like state by state,
Oh,
the penalty level. Anywhere, usually human trafficking will of course be a felony, but the level of felony is sometimes reduced depending on the age of the victim. So, that's something that can be improved across the board, I think.
when you talk about like the digital, predators and stuff like that, is that still significantly higher for kids that are in the foster care system, or is that just kids in general? Because kids in general just have access to devices and games and consoles and computers and stuff. So is that across, like, predators are targeting any minors, or are they still just targeting the most vulnerable?
It's kids everywhere, anywhere. Anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
even my son who he
Yeah.
lives in a safe home with two parents that are still together,
Yeah.
wouldn't be considered vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like I shut him down on several games because he could fall prey to somebody. So I think it is kids across the board right now. There's several resources out there. We have some posted on our bio on Instagram, internet safety toolkits and just stuff that parents can look out for in terms of just that online space and the gaming, etc.
Now that you mentioned it, how do you talk to your son about this? Like, what's early, what's too early to talk to a child about being aware when they're being hunted, or preyed upon? Um, and how does that conversation go?
I don't if they're on the internet, that's when. So like if they're I mean, I assume 8, 9 years old, some of these kids have access because they're now a lot of kids are doing their homework on their laptops
Yeah.
because they're remote, they're virtual. I mean, we've had to really disable browsers and that sort of thing just to keep safe. You type in one wrong word or one wrong syllable and you see something that you could never unsee
Hmm.
again. So I think that's the age, as soon as they're able to be online. And it's a hard conversation, but it's a worthy conversation. My friend Danielle, who's also, she's one of our co-founders. She started talking to her kids about the risks of being online and also the risks of viewing porn. Even starting at 9 years old, she was having these
Yeah.
conversations with her kids because, I mean, and she's very honest about it. These
Hmm.
people are trying to get to you through this certain method,
Hmm.
and it's going to oddly feel good, but then there's going to be shame. So you're going to keep going back to it and really coaching them on how it's going to make them feel, how it's going to be a vicious cycle. And so, like, there's just I don't feel like there's any time that's too early if they're being exposed to anything online.
Yeah, some fear for parents is the fact that, like, well, if I tell my kids about the ugliness of this world, or if I tell my kids about sex and porn, and introduce them to certain dangers, then I'm creating fear-based kids.
Hmm.
Um, where I guess you're saying the opposite. You're creating kids that are more conscious and can
Hmm.
make better choices about these types of things. Is I know you mentioned, where can people find resources? I just want to just, like,
Hmm.
like, before we move on, because I think that there is no, Pastor Robert, he's a dear friend of yours,
Yes.
and mine as well. Just, he's your friend. No, he's our friend. You're our friend, Robert. If you're listening to this, I know you are, and you're critiquing it for sure. Um, he would say that your primary circle of influence is your family,
Hmm.
and that you're doing a disservice to God's call over your life if you are exterior focused, and your family, you're not influencing your family in the right
Right.
way.
Hmm.
Um, for parents, or for those of us that are uncles and aunts, and godparents, what are some of the resources, or places where you can go to, be trained, be coached on this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean there are so many amazing resources. I mean, you can type in internet safety for kids
Okay.
on Google and you can look for it. We have on our Instagram, Brave Global Inc. We have the link in our bio has a link to internet safety for kids. We have some other resources. There's some other really trusted organizations that we believe are doing really hard work in training people on how to speak about exploitation, about porn. You know, a really good resource is just like your dining room table, just sitting down and saying, look, these are the things that are happening a lot of times to women
Hmm.
that are objectifying them and they're being reduced to thinking they're just, only here to serve this purpose. That's not true. Like just having those real conversations. I think, if you're dealing with a kid that's already been through exploitation or trauma, there are some incredible resources out there. And I will say, I'll give our one of our partner organizations, Urban Youth Workers Institute, a shout out. They just
Mm.
released this week a toolkit. It's a trauma informed discipleship toolkit called SCARS, and it was developed by one of their new staff members, Alexander James, who's also a friend of Braves. He's a spoken word poet. It's trauma informed discipleship. So if you are in a faith space and you want to talk to your kids about something they've already been through, that's a great resource as well.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, Urban Youth Workers Institute, and we'll make sure to also have that link under this video. For you, Miley, what has impacted you the most about living on mission with Brave Global personally?
Personally, I think just being a like being awakened to what's happening out there, not living inside of a bubble. I think that, there are just too many things out there that we need to pay attention to. And what I feel like our human nature is to say, oh, that problem seems really big. There's no way that I can solve it. So I'm just going to not do anything. And that's a lie
Mm-hmm.
because I always say one of us can't do everything, but we can all do something.
Mm.
We can all do one thing or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
So if we could all think that way, then the mountain doesn't seem as big. That's what's been the best for me is to understand like little by little. And it's not just me in this fight. There's other people.
yeah. I I think that collectively we're as strong as we are, strong individually, and when we all bring our strengths to the table, now we become a massive force that we deal with. I'm sure you've seen and heard and have experienced a lot of ugliness when it comes to living on mission in combating human sex trafficking and advocating for girls in the foster care system. How do you what gives you hope? Because it might seem daunting, and the more you do, and let's say you get a good group of girls one year and they leave all empowered back to their communities, well, the next year you're going to get probably a new group of girls,
Hmm.
and this will persist. It seems like it's a never ending endeavor. What keeps you hopeful that things are changing and will change?
I think the stories of older girls that have gone through this, and like you pointed out in this book, Brave in Real Life, like this is a compilation of survivor stories. All of them have come through some incredible circumstances in the worst way, but now they are living out their redemptive purpose.
Mm,
Coming into contact with a few of them and helping them now write their own books. Girls come to us all the time that say, I don't have the funds or the platform, the followers, the connections. I don't have a publisher. How can Brave help? And so now we're even starting to help survivors tell their own story and give them those resources. So, what brings me the most hope is really mentoring those women through the next phase. Like, they're like, okay, I've come out of it, and now I want to be a helper. I want to
yeah,
raise awareness. I want to tell young girls what the signs are that I didn't see, that they
yeah.
can see to keep them from going through what I went through. That gives me hope.
That's amazing. You talk about mentoring and coaching and training. Um, how have you learned, to lead such a diverse group of leaders and, internally with your, because like I saw pictures of your guys' retreat, and it looked like a lot of fun, but I know that you guys got a lot of work done, but it was a very good, diverse group.
Hmm.
And also, like, how do you lead leaders that are trying to start chapters, brave chapters in other parts of the country?
Yeah, I think that just understanding that not every leader and not every church or community has the same capacity. Like the model that we have built is very scalable, it's
Mhm.
very customizable. So if there is a school that has a small empowerment club and they don't want to do the big empowerment event, that's usually the catalyst to all of these other things in the community, then they can start out doing a Brave Circle, which is a small group with our curriculum. So we have curriculum published on identity, on healthy relationships and boundaries. This January will be a mental wellness interactive journal that we're publishing. So we have tools for small group things,
Yeah.
stuff that you can do one on one with a mentor, or we have tools that can help you build a big, huge event. So I think that's what's helped is helping leaders and communities realize that if they don't have the capacity to do some huge thing, they still have at least one leader who can lead a small group. So
Yeah.
Brave can look any shape and size based on what their capacity is.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I like I'm as you're talking about these things, I feel like you guys how do you guys come up with resources? Like how do you guys like think of like, okay, this is a need, let's answer it. Let's provide a resource for it. How do you guys do that?
Truthfully, I have a couple of co-founders that are very creative and they have a
Mm,
lot of ideas every
okay.
time we talk. And so it's me going, "Oh yeah, how can we make that happen?" Or wait, we have to stop because we were already doing the five other ideas you said last time.
Right.
So I think that it's just what we strive to do is have all of our resources and curriculum be survivor led. So, any book that we publish, any project that we do is going to be delivered. The message is going to be delivered by a woman who has been through something. Okay. So, we're not creating curriculum by older women who have never experienced a
Wow.
form of exploitation, domestic violence, trafficking. All of our stuff is survivor led. And it's really, really important to us that the girls that we're resourcing and training and equipping and empowering are able to identify with the person who's speaking to them and teaching them.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way too, because you're framing that language in a way that the person that is reading this can understand.
Hmm.
I think that's crucial. I know you guys have a podcast as well.
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's the Brave Girls podcast, and you can find them on Instagram, anywhere that you get your podcasts, iTunes, whatever. It's led by Michaela Nemhard and Alexis Rojas, and they're just incredible. They're two young adults, very, very energetic, and they just talk about all kinds of things. They do podcasts on leadership. They interview some really incredible women. They just did a podcast coming out of the pandemic called COVID Sucks. I mean, it's just a really fun, youthful podcast, and they're just really bright girls, and they have a heart for young girls.
And that's who the podcast is for.
Yep.
It's for young girls.
Hmm.
That's really cool. Miley, what are some of the success stories? I'm pretty sure you have a ton, but maybe like one or two of like new Brave chapters or Brave conferences, partnerships with local governments, and or collaborations among different
Hmm.
churches. What are some of those success stories that someone who's listening to this right now could say, wow, like, dang, there's proof of this concept?
Yeah, well, we have several active chapters in the US. We have a bunch of international partners that have done Brave in some way, shape, or form in different countries. Canada has a lot of momentum right now. They have a lot of blooming chapters. They just did a huge virtual event that reached across many provinces. They probably had 1,000 girls log on. So they're reaching girls in a lot of ways there in Canada. Coming out of COVID in the US, we have not seen as many in person events. So they're
Hmm.
having to
Hmm.
get creative with how they reach girls. We've built a lot of, coming out of COVID, built a lot of virtual resources for people that are doing small groups online with their kids. So we have a lot of free resources if you go to our website. What I'm really excited about right now is the Brave Leadership Academy. And we had a pilot phase just last year. That's all virtual. We're launching a new semester in January. That's for young adult girls to be just coached in character building and leadership skills and life skills.
Yeah.
Um, we're training up a South Africa chapter to do their own Brave Leadership Academy
Mm.
next year as well. And I think that the thing that's bringing me the most hope is I have a couple of girls who contributed to this Brave in Real Life book who, like I said, are trying to start their own, launch their own brands and get awareness out there in their own way. And we're mentoring them through that process. So
That
that's
is
been
so
a
cool.
huge success story for us.
That is so cool, Miley. Like, for someone that is invested and does a lot for these girls, how do you ensure that you know you don't get jaded, like your faith, your relationship with God? Like, how do you? What are some of the disciplines or some of the habits that you personally incorporate in your life to make sure that because I mean, and I'm asking this because you talk to a lot of leaders that lead things. They start off really strong, but the high of success only takes you so far before you realize, like, dang, I'm depleted. And yeah, COVID sucks. I want to hear that episode so bad because I could agree, it sucked. And for a lot of leaders, it exposed them to the fact that they were running on empty. So for you, Miley, what are some of the things that keep you strong and give you life?
Yeah, it's not easy work. It's really, really hard work and you can get weary really quickly. I mean, I'll be honest, like once a month, I'm like, okay, okay, God, I quit. Like
Yeah.
I'm out,
Yeah.
You have those moments where you're like, what am I like? Because it's so much of it is doom and gloom. You really have to search for the success stories and really, stay in it to find the little rays of sunshine wherever you can. If you can do that long enough, it becomes very rewarding and you can find even more of them than you thought that there were. But I would say for me, it's reaching out to other leaders who are not in my space, not doing the work, and not as weary as I am on this level. Maybe they're weary in other ways, but they
Mhm.
have encouragement and life to speak into me.
Yeah.
What what I use a lot is Marco Polo. I know that sounds like super like just elementary, but Marco Polo is an app that just allows you to video chat. I do that a lot with
Huh.
people who I know will reply to me and just pray over me.
Yeah.
I can stop it, pause it, restart it. I rely a lot on other leaders who are of the same um, faith and just the mind of reaching the same girls to
Mhm.
speak into what I'm doing. It's huge.
Yeah. So you're basically what you're saying is, yeah, you're not doing life alone.
No, there's a community. You have to have community. If you're doing life alone,
Yeah. It's gonna
not
be
gonna
over
work.
for you. Game over, right?
Not gonna work.
You said something that I don't want anyone to miss just now. You said that you're doing something that's really hard because you have to dig for the success stories. But if you stay in it long enough, and I feel that people get very discouraged because we want instant success, like we're being primed by Prime, to get things quick and to get things instantaneously and to get the satisfaction of things that we do. We post a picture of a highlight and we get instant likes and stuff like that. And so for a lot of people, when they put so much effort and output into something, but there's not an immediate gratification or success story from it, they quit before they ever see the fruit of their labors.
Hmm.
And you said, like, if you stay in it long enough, you'll be able to see. It's like, and again, we go back to like sowing seeds, right? You sow seeds that would one day bear fruit. Um, what motivates you now to keep going?
Um, I think that I always just go back to like think of how long Jesus has to wait on us.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like, you know,
no.
we serve a God who's super patient.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. Like, I mean, think of him if he was sitting here right now saying like, I waited on you so long.
Mm-hmm.
I waited to see
Mm-hmm.
the fruit of what I've been trying to pour into you. I've been waiting for you to listen to me. I've been waiting for you to get it. You finally are getting it. Now I'm finally seeing the ray of sunshine come out of the fruits that you're bearing, of the work that you're doing. I mean, just think of how long he's waited. It takes perseverance. It doesn't, I mean,
Yeah.
it can't be, he was never in it for instant gratification. I mean, he's in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
So if that's our example, we got to be in it for the long haul too.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Speaking of advice, if you can go back now and talk to that Miley who was here on staff at Revive Church and was invited to now lead Brave. If you can go back and give her one piece of advice, what would you tell her?
What would I tell her? Gosh, don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid. Believe in the people who say they believe in you and just go for it. I mean, I went for it, but it wasn't without like some major, trepidation.
No, it's scary. It's super scary. I think that that's the message and the theme here that I would love everyone that's listening to this to know. As we close this out, just and I hope that you took notes. Please rewatch this wherever you are. Just subscribe. Leave us. Let us know what is your biggest takeaway about this, Miley. Before we go, how can people get connected to Brave? How can they participate and be a part of what you guys are doing?
Yeah. A couple of different ways. You can find us at braveglobal.org. We're also on Facebook and on Instagram. You can follow us. Like I said, we have a lot of free resources if you're caring for kids. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you
Yeah.
anytime.
And we need you guys to go get this book, brave.org, and read it and buy a copy for someone. The holidays are here and the new year is here. And so we want you to go get this. Miley, thank you so much for being on our show. We're praying for you. We're rooting for you. And thank you so much for everything you've come to share with us today.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
And guys, don't forget to subscribe. Please leave us a rating and a review. Share this, tag Miley Waterman on all social platforms so she knows that you heard. And go and send, and Brave is also on all social platforms as well, right? So go follow Brave as well. And as you listen to this podcast, make sure you share it with a friend or two. Until next time, go offer hope, ignite hearts, and live in freedom.